Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Let's try that. So modulating clipping level again. Now if I wanted to change it up a little bit, could change the waveform. Let's try triangle instead. Bring up the frequency. I could also bring this up a little bit, a little further. A little further. Nice little warbly sound. Now if I just kind of try to match that with the tempo of my sequence over there, get something rhythmically pleasing. Okay. Now if you look down at our bottom section here, our processing section, I haven't really added my envelope generator, so let's bring that back in. And just listen to how that actually changes the sound. That actually has a little bit better of an effect. Whereas the kind of the up and the down movements from the LFO when I had my gain up and not being affected by the envelope generator. Sometimes the tempo of this was a little off from our sequencer because the two of them are not synchronized necessarily in any way. But if I bring back my envelope generator, that one is actually synced to the tempo. So I can get kind of a more rhythmic, pleasing effect. Now, if I wanted to take it one step further, I could, of course, take another modulation signal. I usually like to do this. And then modulate a second parameter. Although we've seen kind of just going along that in general, you kind of get the best results when you have one parameter static. But let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to bring down with symmetry, CV, modulation input there all the way down. I'm going to patch it and then just bring it up just a little bit. See if we get something interesting. And I guess the challenge at that point becomes getting your modulation settings such that it's useful throughout the entire range of your modulation, rather than getting that effect where your waveform gets swallowed up by the settings on here, which is fairly easy to do. And bring up my level input. I think it's all the way up. Okay. So a few last things that I wanted to mention about this module before we sort of conclude the series. There are a couple things that I didn't really get to dive into, mainly just for time's sake. I wanted to keep it with simple waveforms. But in general, it kind of recommended you start out with triangle and sine waves. But I actually patched in the pulse and saw into this and actually got some fairly decent results. So let's actually just see really quick and hear what we get. And in general, it kind of affects the sound in a very similar way. Like if you have no modulation and you bring your symmetry, it kind of flips the waveform over just like it did with the other one, with the other waveforms that we messed around with. And even the pulse wave, if we patch a simple pulse wave in there, you kind of flip it over. And then of course if we had a modulation signal going in, let's take that triangle from our bottom section and go into symmetry. bring down the CV input there. I think that sounds a little bit like pulse width modulation, but it's not really adjusting the pulse width, it's more adjusting the where the high and the low parts of the waveform are happening. But it kind of adds kind of a nice, interesting movement. So that was just one more thought. And then one last thought, and this is really the last thought. I kind of just ran across this by accident, kind of modulating with audio rate. Found some kind of interesting tonalities that I could generate in the waveform processor. Now I know it is kind of somewhat similar to frequency modulation or ring modulation, but if I patch into this, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Let me get back to my sine wave here, because I got some fairly interesting effects with that. And I'll just take this triangle wave that I'm over here, and it's now at audio rate. We'll just patch into here, but we're doing audio rate this time. Now at high settings, of course, obviously you're going to get some crazy kind of modulation there, but if I bring it down a little lower, you can kind of create these nice little warbly waveforms, kind of like that. Kind of right on the edges of, like if you were listening to this waveform, it would probably be in the lower frequency range. And as it's coming in here, it's having a very interesting effect and kind of making the waveform jump up and down. Let's see that with a triangle wave too. Let's bring up the frequency a little bit. And then let's adjust our clipping level just a little. But you get the idea. If there's some other outside the box type settings that you can get. So I just wanted to share that before we wrap up our series. I think it's been a fairly useful series. I kind of got some fairly useful knowledge out of this, just experimenting with the A116, and learned a few tricks. Hopefully some of these things help you out along your modular path, or at least you get to hear a module that you have never seen in real life or anything like that, and maybe consider it, or maybe not consider it. Listening to it, going, hey, I don't really think this is for me. Glad I didn't buy that. I'd rather get the A137 or some other module that you might want. But that's going to do it for me this time around. I'm not entirely certain what we're doing in the next set of videos yet. I don't have anything specifically planned for those, but whatever it is, I'm sure I'll be in touch one way or another. Again, I do invite you guys to look back at some of the previous videos. Have quite a library going on out there on YouTube. So if you want to watch some of those, like if any of these things that we saw over here, LFOs or the sequencing part or the VCO part kind of threw you off or anything like that, I invite you to kind of watch some of those previous videos that I've done, and hopefully that'll answer some of your questions, or shoot me some comments up on YouTube, or find me through some other routes. At any rate, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.